Welcome to the latest episode of Investec Focus Talks, a series of candid conversations with leaders, innovators, and changemakers. I'm Tanya Dos Santos, Global Head of Sustainability at Investec, and today I will be talking to international award-winning filmmaker Donovan Marsh. Donovan is a Johannesburg-born filmmaker and screenwriter. He lives in Los Angeles and is often drawn back to his home country of South Africa to tell our unique stories. It was one such story that drew him back to South Africa to do the 2021 crime thriller, I Am All Girls. The film is based on real events, and the plot reveals the underreported yet burgeoning issue of human trafficking in South Africa. Thank you for joining us today, Donovan. So Donovan, tell us what inspired you to get into filmmaking, and tell us a little bit about that journey.
I can remember far back when we didn't really know what filmmaking was, and I knew I liked going to films, and I knew I liked watching them, but I had no clue how they were made, and there were no such thing as behind the scenes or making ofs. And when I was 16, I saw a making of A Never-Ending Story, that movie that I loved, and I thought, so that's how they do it. That's what I want to do. Oh, that looks like fun. I'll make that my living. And I remember deciding that very particularly. I think I was 15, and I never wavered.
Wow. Yeah. So you went straight into directing. Has it always been the same type? Has it always been commercial films?
I started off doing television of all stripes. I did weird shows like Gladiators and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and I directed, so there's multicam television, but I always wanted to do drama, and I'm from a theatre background. I went to drama school. So that was always a dream to actually direct movies. But it's tremendously hard to get into that world, very competitive, very tough, and not a lot of people can make a living out of it. So eventually I managed to weasel my way in.
But how did you actually make that transition and adapt to the different genres? I mean, generally someone sticks to, what they're good at.
You just do it, you just come up with the story. I realized that the way to get anything done is to do everything yourself. So I became a little master of each of the different trades. I write, I edit, I direct, I produce,
wow.
I create. So I didn't have to rely on anybody else to give me the leg up. I was giving myself the leg up, and that's how it got started.
So many South Africans would probably know you best for the Spud movies. I, in particular, love the Spud movies, watched them firstly with my son and then my daughter. And I was very relieved after we watched with my son that he chose not to go to boarding school. But if he did, I definitely think that Michael House would be a great option. How did you draw on your own school experiences for that movie?
Well, I went to a very similar school. I went to Bishops in Cape Town, and so it was almost identical. And I actually took many of my own experiences and added them to John van der Reit's experiences in the book and created that world. Tremendously easy. I loved school, and it was very evocative, and it shapes you as a human being. And Spud is a coming-of-age film, and it's about how school shapes you, especially those kinds of schools, or doesn't shape you, or ruins you, or destroys you, or how you survive it. And I really resonated with all the things that the book was dealing with.
And working with John Cleese, I mean, he's such an icon in the acting career. So how was it for you working with him?
Yeah, John Cleese was always the person we wanted for the roles, what I always imagined in the role, and he was perfect. But getting to him was tremendously difficult. And after many, many months of trying, he eventually persuaded his agent to read the script and got the script to him. And as soon as he read it, he said yes. It's one of the nicest scripts he's ever read. He loves the material, and he can't wait to do it. And
was he easy to work with? I mean, difficult to get to, but then easy to work with.
He's an incredible human being. He's highly intelligent. He's got a law degree. He's very involved. He works on the script with you. He knows what he's good at and how he can make the most of the material and where the laughs are and how he can find those laughs. I mean, you're talking about a guy from Monty Python here, so you're not going to question his way of doing things. But, I still had my own requirements, very collaborative. He was in his 70s, so maybe a bit grumpy here and there, and movie making is arduous on the youngest of people. But I had an amazingly positive experience with him, and I really connected with him, I think.
That's really good to hear, because he seems like that kind of man. You always wonder what actors are like behind the scenes.
Yeah, actors have to be very open. That's the craft. You have to be open to people and highly empathic. And they're very sensitive human beings. You need to be sensitive. And so if you meet them as another sensitive human being, you'll get a good result. I've never had, ever with anybody I've ever worked with, problems. because I try and meet them as empathic human beings.
Wow.
Yeah.
So empathy is obviously a key skill to your career and to being a director. What other characteristics are important for you to have?
It's a tremendously collaborative art. It is an art form. It's like painting, except unlike painting, there are many painters all painting the same picture at the same time. So you kind of imagine this canvas with lots of brushes that are coming in, and it's almost guaranteed to end up in a dog's breakfast. So the director's job really is to take all those paintbrushes and make sure they're dipping in the right colors and that they're painting in unison, that everything forms a beautiful picture at the end. And it's actually tremendously tough to do that. And that's why so many movies actually don't feel like they're any good. It's not because people didn't try, and it's not because they're untalented, but to try and create that concert of everybody coming together. And that is the director's job. I'm not doing anything particular. I'm not acting. I'm not doing the camera work. I'm not doing the music composition. But I'm getting all those people to work together to achieve a singular vision. And that is the job of the director.
So you must have immense patience as well then.
Patience is a virtue, though. Notoriously, directors are impatient and scream and shout, but it's not my style. You have to have a lot of awareness, I think. You need to be able to predict how people will respond emotionally to things so that you can guide them correctly, and that each human being requires a different approach, and it's marrying all the different approaches is very tough.
Okay.
Yeah.
And your 2019 movie with Gary Oldman and one of my favorite actors, Gerard Butler.
He has a lot of fans.
Yeah, I'm sure. Hunter Killer. I mean, wow, that's a huge film to direct. How did you land up in that space?
Well, I have an agent in Los Angeles. I got an agent of my earlier films, and their job is to sell me out there. And I regularly, every few months, I'm pitching on scripts, and they send me stuff, and I pitch against various other people, and you go through a process. Eventually, they fly you to Los Angeles to meet the studio and to meet the star. And I came to meet Gerard Butler, and you just got to chip away at it. And eventually, if you're lucky, you get the part.
Well, I don't think you're lucky. I think there was a lot of hard work behind that. I mean,
Sure.
what did you actually? Why do you think they picked you over everyone else?
I was cheap? No. Well, it's partly true. I think, Hollywood's always looking for something young and something fresh and something different and somebody with a different point of view. You've got to hand that to Hollywood. They are always trying to do something original, often failing. And I think they saw in me somebody with a different sensibility. They liked what they saw in my previous films. I do have a particular style that is unique. And I think they wanted to see if they could experiment with that style in the film.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing, from a South African perspective to have this immense profile, moving from South Africa, directing films here, and then next thing you're directing a massive Hollywood production. How was it for you? I mean, surely there was a much bigger budget than you were used to. You're working with these A-list, actors. How did you adapt to that?
My approach was to treat them exactly the same as I treat local actors, to approach the film in exactly the same way I would. And that is to say, with total respect, with a very clear vision and clear ideas. And I didn't try to, I met Gerard Butler. I didn't laugh at his jokes if they weren't funny. I didn't unnecessarily compliment him unless he was doing some good work. And I try to just meet them as human beings. It's very difficult because there's a hierarchy in Hollywood. It's very competitive, a lot of money to be made and lost. And so, to stay in the pecking order and to have your voice heard, even though you're the director, sometimes you can feel you're not hearing me because you're dealing with big stars who feel like they know it all and they've got 40 movies under their belt and I've just got 5 or 6. And so it's very tough following through on my ideas. I came with ideas, the reason I got the job, but then to actually execute those ideas without getting them overly meddled with and ruined is hard. And I don't say I always achieved it on that film. I often felt there were compromises on that film I was not happy with and would never otherwise have to make on a South African film where I can do what I want. But that's part of the process. You've got to work your way in there and prove to them, that you know what you're doing. And so it was reproving myself was a challenge. And tough, very, very tough, emotionally, physically, stressful. But in the end, I treated it exactly as I would a South African film.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm getting the sense that authenticity is another key characteristic that you seem to have, which makes you unique. And often you meet directors and they're not authentic. I don't meet directors often, but often you meet people who talk about the fakeness of Hollywood. So I think it's quite rare to see, that in the context. So patience, tolerance, authenticity.
Well, you've got to be very honest. You've got to be very honest and very clear about what you want. They smell weakness. If somebody like Gary Oldman says to you, what do you want me to do here? What are you thinking here? And you go, well, you're dead. They'll just eat you up alive. They'll just take over. They'll push you aside. They'll do their own thing. So that's a real challenge. You always have to have an answer. You always have to have clarity, and you've got to be as honest as you can about it. Yeah.
Okay. How did COVID impact the filmmaking industry?
It was devastating for the film industry. People who were caught mid-production couldn't finish, couldn't carry on. People couldn't shoot the movies they had planned. I couldn't do the things I had planned. So devastating overall. I was tremendously lucky to have finished the shooting of I Am All Girls just prior to COVID hitting. And I was able to complete the film under COVID because it was just post-production. And then, Netflix didn't have any content 2 years. It was a very hard sell. The movie was made. It was independently produced, very bravely by Antiba Pictures had put the money up. It was their first feature film.
Are they a local production?
They're a local production company, a tremendous group of guys and girls. But they couldn't sell it. They wanted to do a theatrical release, which I was against because I think it's too tough for that kind of audience who generally see Marvel movies. And so we struggled to sell the film. We struggled to make a sale for the film. And it was even a tough sell to Netflix because the subject matter is so dark and difficult. But because COVID meant there was no content, suddenly they needed content. And so they took a risk, Netflix, on I Am All Girls. They didn't think people could stomach it, quite frankly. And we put it on Netflix. It was the most successful South African film they'd ever put on that channel. It was seen by 30 million households worldwide. It had tremendous reach. It was number 2 in the United States on the week it came out. And so it just reached people, and a lot of people saw it. And it's a huge success story for Netflix as an African piece of content.
Sure. And I mean, ironically, during COVID, people were turning to Netflix. They had more time to. So there was probably great timing in the end.
Yeah. And Netflix has been tremendous for the local film industry because they do want to niche out, as they realize, yes, there's an audience for Marvel movies, but there's an audience for every kind of film. And because they're a subscription service, it's not like, oh, we have to have tentpole thing one after the other. Oh, we have to make something for them, for our base. No, there's other people who are more interested in fringe content, and so that brings in more subscribers of a different stripe. But the amazing thing about I Am All Girls, because it's a police procedural, because it's a thriller, it did actually have a reach into the base, and it did reach 30 million households for a movie of that nature. Is a tremendous result. And it's thanks to people like Netflix who've revitalized the South African film industry, have given us an avenue of funding that we've never had before, realizing that local content is what local people want to see, but actually it's also what international people want to see, because in a way we're tired of American and British content. We've saturated on it. We've seen those worlds, we've heard those accents, and we've witnessed those subcultures, and we've got our own subcultures, and we've got our own issues that are fascinating and interesting, and they're characters you haven't met and stories you haven't heard and places that you've never been. And so Netflix have recognized that. They're giving us money. I'm making another film with them, doing exactly the same. It's even in vernacular, but it's for a big audience. And it's been tremendous. So
can you tell us a little bit more about what you're currently working on?
I'm working on a gangster film. I can't say more than that, unfortunately. I am NDA'd. But it's just another example.
South African based.
South African film through and through, South African talent through and through. And they've been amazing. Often, whenever I do a film for the studio, they want to put studio names, they want to put American actors in. And I hate an American actor coming in, putting in a bad South African accent and pretending they're from Rosettenville when they wouldn't never even been there. And it doesn't feel authentic. In this film, it's all local actors. That's what Netflix wants. That's what they're committed to. And we're going to make our own stars here.
Okay. So from, local humor to international action to I Am All Girls, which is obviously a very serious and very painful topic to have tackled as a director. Tell us how that came to be. How did you end up picking I Am All Girls, or did it pick you?
Well, another producer came to me with the material based on a true story of Van Rooyen and Joy Harhoff back in the late 90s, abducted 6 girls who were never found, and then they were murdered. And it was a story using that as a kickoff point, and I thought that was fascinating and interesting, and I liked the world. I thought it was an important topic. I love doing things that have a lot of atmosphere. They showed me the script. It was terrible. And I said to them, well, if you let me take complete control of this thing and completely rewrite the script and see if I can find something in here. I wanted to do something more arty than I had done before. I'd done a lot of commercial films. I wanted to do a difficult film. I wanted to do an artistic film. I wanted it to be honest and true and beautiful. And I wanted to create an atmosphere so that you could feel what it was like to be somebody who was trafficked and what it feels like to police that and have to live it every day.
So I have to be honest with you. I did watch the whole movie, but I felt incredibly uncomfortable watching it. And it left me feeling a bit desolate, a bit empty. It didn't leave me, it wasn't your typical feel-good movie. What did you want to achieve with the movie, and what did you want people to be left with?
I think it would have been dishonest to have an upending on a movie about human trafficking, modern slavery. It just felt wrong to have, and we debated the end at great length about, I don't want to give the ending away, but what state are we going to leave our heroes in at the end of the film? Are they going to be healed and off to live a wonderful life? And that just seemed dishonest. And so I wanted simultaneously to say, this world is not sorted out. It requires your further attention. And to give you, I think there's a strand, and the leads of the film are two women. One is a Hawks, a police woman investigating human trafficking, and the other is somebody who survived slavery and survived being trafficked as a child. But these women hold on to their integrity, do not give up on seeking justice for what has happened to them. And I thought that was a powerful message. And so, yes, I wanted you to feel uncomfortable. You needed to feel uncomfortable. But I hope you felt like, well, here are two women who did something about it and made a difference, who found some justice and will continue to do that.
I certainly felt, how can I do more?
Yeah.
What is it that I need to be doing? I need to play my part. I can't ignore this. So, and I think that's important enough to...
You never know to what degree films influence people to behave in different ways, and that's okay if it doesn't create behavioral change, but I think making you aware, bringing it into the conversation, now people can talk about it, they have the facts at their fingertips, they understand it, it's in the dialogue. And I think over time that translates to some kind of change. And certainly what you guys are doing here at Investec, committing to stopping the money trail and making it hard for these people to conduct business. I like to think all these things are linked, and that what the movie did and what you're doing is all combining to create a larger consciousness around the issue. And hopefully that motivates people, or some people.
Sure. At the end of the film, you have a stat that talks to between 500,000 and 700,000 women being trafficked annually, and yet less than 1% are recovered. What actually happens to these women?
What we discovered is those few women that get rescued and go into these, often into a halfway house, or they get into a rescue center, they end up recycling back into the life. That's what happens, unfortunately. And so then the NGOs that I worked with were saying, yes, we take, we might rescue 30 girls a month, but only one of those girls will actually cycle out and actually have a life outside of trafficking. Those other 29 girls eventually just find that there's no other choices for them, no other way to earn a living. They're addicted to drugs mostly, so they clean up in the halfway house, then they start taking drugs again. The only way to pay for drugs is to go back into the life. Drugs is, to me, the big thing that traps people into this life, both pimps and girls alike. Often they're similarly trapped, and there's no way out. And so that's why so few people actually get out. Yeah,
which is incredibly sad, because if we can't reach them before that point, it's even harder once they're out the system.
I mean, all the girls that I interviewed and brothels I went to, there's no locked door on the front. They can walk out the door any second they want. They just can't. Their identity documents have been withheld from them or being held by the pimps, often a higher pimp up who wouldn't be seen in a brothel. And so they've got identity documents, and they have no money, and they're addicted to drugs, and they have no way of procuring those drugs cheaply other than through their pimps. And so the pimps are quite happy to let the girls go off wherever. They know they're coming back.
Yes, it's almost a spiral.
They don't even mind with the NGO lady. Well, I went with an NGO lady into a brothel, and you would have thought these pimps would be, and her objective is to save these girls, but she's got a relationship with the pimps. The pimps almost don't mind. They've got a problem girl. They'll let the NGO lady take her, clean her up if she's got a drug addiction. And they just know the girls will be back. And so, they're happy for the NGOs to come in and take the girls sometimes.
So you've explained how it's, extreme poverty and desperation, and very vulnerable people that land up in being trafficked. Can you tell us a bit more about the heroes, about, the people who are working night and day to catch and to stop human trafficking?
Yeah, so in the movie I made, the protagonist is a Hawks colonel, female, and she investigates human trafficking. And so we went to meet the real Hawks who police this for South Africa. There's only 14 of them. They have to do every single case in the whole of South Africa, tens of thousands of cases. And we found some incredibly dedicated men and women who, the police are often maligned in this country, but I found them to be singularly dedicated. These were people who, had to take different routes home every night because they get followed, whose families are at risk because of the work they do. And these people don't sleep, they're traumatized, but that doesn't stop them going full on to catch these people. And they work 24/7, they work together in amazing ways. Were tremendously helpful in the movie. They allowed my actors who were playing them ostensibly in the film to go along with them, learn them, meet their families, enter their world. And they really are unsung heroes, working for peanuts, working in a terrible building that's run down, but making the most of it, not complaining and getting the job done.
I mean, you just described what NGOs do as well.
Yeah.
So they're also the other unsung heroes that we don't talk enough about.
I mean, there's obviously corruption there too, but the ones I met were astonishing. Yeah.
So, I mean, it was an incredibly hard topic for you to tackle. I wonder if, do filmmakers have a responsibility to help spotlight some of these very deep, dark issues?
Look, there's documentary films and what I do, which is drama entertainment. And so I think all documentarian or documentary directors that I know feel a responsibility to highlight issues. And the best documentaries are ones that open up a world that no one's seen before and therefore make a difference in a very real way. Whereas what I do is entertainment. And so I always feel slightly uncomfortable around these issue films because it's a fine line between exploitation of the subject matter and me using that subject matter to shock you or thrill you and create an adventure. Is that really fair? And so often I'm ambivalent sometimes about my role in issues. And is it really the role of the entertainer to be taking on issues or taking a position on issues? And great entertainment, in my view, tells all sides of the story. You want to show all sides and let the viewer come up with their own decision about what's right and what's wrong. I see that as my role, is to be honest about what's happening. And if I can be really honest about it, even though I'm making a piece of entertainment, I think that's the best I can do, and then leave you to decide.
Yeah, I think it's great because you reach a different audience.
Yeah.
There's a certain audience that'll watch a documentary and there's a completely different audience that will watch a movie for entertainment.
Yeah. And you won't tolerate being preached to in entertainment. One just doesn't, In a documentary, it's somewhat different. But yeah, so I don't try to preach. I don't try to tell people what to think. I try to give them the facts and give them the emotion, really. Yeah. How does it feel? What does it feel like to be in this world?
Yeah.
And if you get that, that's good, I think.
Yeah. I also love the way at the end of the film, you dedicated it to the families and the people who have actually been trafficked. So I think in that way you were saying this is more than just a story. This is real. This is, something that is being lived every single day. What are your final thoughts in terms of how people can take a stance, can speak up, can do something about this?
Yeah. I mean, you've got to keep talking about it is my main thing. You've got to keep it in the conversation. You don't shy away from it. Meet people who, if you have a chance to ever meet someone in the world, and I meet them quite often, is people want to tell their stories. People want to be heard. People want you to recognize them. People want to be seen as equal human beings, even if they've been through something incredibly traumatic. And the amount of people that even you wouldn't even know, but are working here in your bank that have had the amount of people that I know, like they're just people in my social, that you wouldn't consider have been victims of human trafficking, or even it's just for a short while, who were abducted or were recruited. This is happening right around us. You just need to be aware of it, and you can do things. If you see it and notice it, speak to those people, hear their stories, and if it's in your direct ambit to do something, do it. I think that's probably the best you can expect from the average person. Yeah.
Donovan, thank you so much for your patience.
It's a pleasure, thank you.
For your authenticity and your determination to keep tackling these. We really look forward to seeing the sequel of I Am All Girls too.
Thank you. Yeah, we're excited. We want to do something, possibly a TV series.
Great. Thank you.
Cheers.